Iran took more than 24 hours to officially acknowledge that the IRIS Dena was gone. When the acknowledgement came, it came not as a statement of grief, but as a declaration of intent. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi posted on X, "The US has perpetrated an atrocity at sea 2,000 miles from Iran's shores. Frigate Dena, a guest of India's Navy carrying almost 130 sailors, was struck in international waters without warning. Mark my words, the US will come to bitterly regret the precedent it has set." Those were not empty words from a diplomat managing a loss. They were a carefully framed legal, moral and strategic argument designed for multiple audiences simultaneously: the Iranian public, the international community and Washington. Araghchi called the sinking an act of state terrorism. He called it a cowardly and unlawful assault on a sovereign warship in international waters. He warned of severe and proportionate consequences that would extend across multiple domains. And then he added the phrase that changes the entire geographic scope of the threat, hinting that Iran's response would not be limited to the Middle East theatre where the war began. The IRGC Commander General Qiumars Haidari made the operational dimension of that threat explicit on Iranian state television on Thursday. He said the IRGC has decided to fight Americans wherever they are, and added that Iran does not care how long this war lasts. Hours after that statement, the IRGC announced it had struck a US oil tanker in the northern Persian Gulf, which was reported to be on fire. That strike, if confirmed by independent sources, would represent a direct Iranian attack on commercial energy infrastructure in retaliation for the Dena sinking, precisely the kind of escalation analysts had warned about. The detail that gives Araghchi's legal argument its international weight is the one that India's government has been visibly uncomfortable with since Wednesday morning. The IRIS Dena had been India's guest. It participated in the International Fleet Review and the multilateral MILAN 2026 naval exercises at Visakhapatnam, India, hosted by the Indian Navy from February 15th to 25th. Exercises that included ships from 74 countries and 85 vessels, including naval delegations from both the United States and Iran. There are photographs from that exercise showing American and Iranian sailors standing side by side. The Iranian crew members posed for selfies with Indian naval officers. India officially welcomed the IRIS Dena on its own social media on February 17th. 9 days after it departed Visakhapatnam, a US submarine torpedoed it in waters 44 nautical miles off Sri Lanka's southern coast. India did not comment publicly for more than 24 hours after the sinking. When the Indian Navy finally issued a statement on Thursday evening, it said only that it had received the distress signal and deployed resources, by which point Sri Lanka had already led the rescue operation. India neither criticised nor endorsed the strike. It said nothing of diplomatic consequence. That silence is itself a statement. India has cultivated a carefully balanced position in the US-Iran conflict. It buys Iranian oil under sanctions waivers, it maintains close defense ties with the United States, and it sees the Indian Ocean as its strategic sphere of influence. The IRIS Dena sinking directly challenged all three of those positions simultaneously. Retired Indian Vice Admiral Pradeep Chauhan confirmed the strategic significance plainly. Navies do not fight like armies lobbing ordnance across a land border. They engage wherever the enemy might be found. With China and Russia now also sending naval forces into the area, he added, the situation is fraught with risk for everyone. Sri Lanka confirmed on Thursday that a second Iranian warship had entered its exclusive economic zone, the maritime area beyond territorial waters where Sri Lanka has sovereign resource rights, and was heading toward the same area where the Dena was sunk. Sri Lanka's cabinet spokesman told Parliament the government was doing its utmost to safeguard lives on that vessel. The presence of a second Iranian warship in Sri Lankan waters, while a US fast attack submarine is confirmed to be operating in the same area, is a scenario that Sri Lankan officials described with maximum diplomatic caution and visible alarm. Now here is the diplomatic dimension that sits in direct tension with Iran's revenge rhetoric. Araghchi denied in his NBC interview and in subsequent statements that Iran has sought a deal or asked for a ceasefire. US officials denied Iran had made any serious outreach, yet reporting from multiple outlets during the conflict's opening days indicated that backchannel contacts were attempted through Oman, that Iran's intelligence ministry reached out to the CIA, and that Araghchi himself had been in Geneva with Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff 2 days before the strikes began. The contradiction between Iran's public position, no talks, no ceasefire, and the reported private outreach reflects the same dual-track behavior that has characterized Iran's posture throughout this conflict. One hand publicly vowing revenge, the other quietly probing for an exit. The US weapons stockpile concern that emerged from Thursday's Senate briefings adds another layer of complexity to the revenge calculation. Senator Richard Blumenthal, a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, told reporters he is deeply concerned about Ukraine specifically because the Iran campaign is burning through sophisticated US munitions that are vital to Ukraine's defense. He said the US would be hard-pressed at some point to tell Ukraine what is coming. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt pushed back, maintaining the US has sufficient stockpiles for all commitments, but the concern is now public on the record from a senator who sat in the classified briefing. The administration's position that the US can sustain this fight for as long as necessary now has a specific congressional counterweight attached to it. The House of Representatives voted on Thursday to reject a war powers resolution that would have restricted Trump's authority to continue military action against Iran. The vote was 212 to 219, with just 2 Republicans breaking from Trump. The Senate had already rejected a similar resolution 47 to 53. Both chambers have now voted to preserve Trump's full operational authority. The legal and legislative architecture for continuing and expanding the campaign is fully in place on both sides of Capitol Hill. The bottom line on the IRIS Dena's aftermath is this: Iran has vowed revenge in specific multi-domain terms. Its IRGC commander said the fight will happen wherever Americans are found. A second Iranian warship is in Sri Lankan waters. India has been embarrassed into silence by an attack on its own guest in its own strategic backyard. The diplomatic channel that both sides publicly deny exists has not produced a ceasefire proposal, a meeting request, or a formal backchannel framework that either side is willing to acknowledge, and Congress has now voted twice to give Trump unlimited authority to continue the operation. Iran's revenge threat is real. The window through which it can be delivered meaningfully is narrowing fast, and both Tehran and Washington know it.